And we are live. Welcome everyone. We've got a lot of viewers for this stream. I wonder why. Either way, this is a topic that I've been thinking about for quite a while in many different senses of the word. And I decided that today I'd approach it because I have seen it quite a lot amongst many people. And by the way, for the sake of a comment that I saw earlier on, this also includes the feeling when no wife posting. So this isn't a thing that's unique to the GF thing, right? I want to make it very clear. It's any sort of posting that pertains to loneliness, to being single, that relates to anything of that sort. So, before I start with the negative consequences of this, I think that every single man and every single woman, frankly, in this chat, knows what it is like to be lonely. It's not like we come out of the womb and that we're suddenly thrown into a relationship, or that we reach some arbitrary omega point, and that is when we cease being lonely because we meet a woman, or meet a guy, for that matter. This isn't how life works. Many people who are in perfectly good marriages are lonely. Many people who are single are not. So, it's important to realise that you can receive loneliness completely besides this girlfriend problem. But I do think that many people are legitimately starved of that kind of thing. Although maybe not quite as many as, maybe if you're sitting here and thinking it might not be you, and maybe that you're missing something out. In fact, I think that the case with a lot of the feeling when no GF posters is there's often a larger issue at play, and that needs to be, paid attention to, right? Everyone knows how people who do that are feeling, and I mean everyone. Everyone from Arnold Schwarzenegger to, the smallest, most muscularly small, most beta man to ever live. Every single person on Earth knows this feeling to some extent or another. That's something that needs to be remembered. And second of all, you aren't alone, but you need to stop this. And we'll explain why. This is going to be a very question-heavy stream, because I see there's a lot of viewers, and I suspect that many people will want some clarifications on some of the points that I'm going to make here. So, I've got 4 reasons down as to why it's wrong. Why you should never ever do it, and why you only stitch yourself up by doing this. You should never ever, in case I haven't made myself clear enough, never ever do this. First of all, you constantly remind yourself of the loneliness that you have when you do it. It's like when you repeat certain words out loud to yourself. You habituate yourself into thinking it, right? Some people use this as an argument against religion. They say, well, you're repeating the creed every day, surely that must habituate you into thinking it. That's not strictly the case, because you have to believe the creed first before you even set foot in the church to actually, say it. Right? There's a previous intellective time before that, unless you were born into a family where you've been doing it since you were a child, in which case you can talk to all manner of converts and read all manner of books, right? But you repeat this behaviour, and this particularly works with negative behaviours. You repeat it and you slowly begin to remind yourself of the loneliness, right? Constantly. Like, you're posting that you don't have a girlfriend, therefore you're just lonely by default. Which is, of course, not something that needs to happen, because, as we've discussed earlier on, the lack of a girlfriend doesn't necessarily mean loneliness. But when you post this over and over again, you're exciting the passion. And the excitation of the passion is only going to make it worse. As you do this more and more, you only make yourself more and more lonely. It's like a drug. When you, say, indulge in marijuana, right? You initially a little bit is enough and you're satisfied. It's the same with sorrow. You need more and more of it to be satisfied. It's a certain strange thing. with human emotion where you sort of half enjoy it, and as time goes on, you get more and more habituated into it. You will cause this. This is just keeping this vicious cycle going. And another result of this is that you're habituated into the state of being without a girlfriend, and that becomes part of your identity. If you spend your time constantly that feeling when no GF posting, or doing things of that sort, then you're going to be habituated into the state of I'm not with a girlfriend, which is going to lead to self-sabotage. It's going to lead to, I suspect, many people picking women who otherwise would be a really, really bad idea just to alleviate their loneliness. I know that I've certainly been in a situation where I've been tempted to do that, although thank God, God has given me the grace to be able to say no when I've been in that situation. You are habituated into this horrendous loneliness. You're habituated into a state where you're without a GF, so it may be the case with you that you're just simply going to self-sabotage. You're going to simply remain away from women, and so you're never going to solve the problem if it is actually a problem for you. That's another reason. Third reason. It appears pathetic to a lot of people who mock you, which makes this worse, right? You're going to... I mean, first of all, I think that there's a certain kind of person who would get very self-righteous for being mocked by such a thing, And that, of course, leads to a growth in pride, which is bad. Pride is never good. But it also makes you pusillanimous. If you're being mocked for it, then you just get confirmation of the fact that you are not worthy or whatever of a girlfriend. Or you're unworthy to talk to women, right? But it is a behaviour that will be mocked for very obvious reasons that I don't think I need to make clear. And the final reason that I've got noted here is that it presumes that being without a girlfriend makes you a lesser person. Because obviously when a person makes this kind of post, it's kind of self-deprecating, but it also speaks to a desire for something that they don't have. As if a girlfriend will make you whole. She won't. I can tell you for a fact now, she won't. If you have problems now, they will be worse with a girlfriend. If they are, of a different... If the thing that's causing the loneliness isn't simply the lack of company. And believe me, there can be many reasons for that. Lack of purpose in life, lack of prayer, just being afflicted by despondency and acedia, which are solved by prayer. Acedia, for those who want to know, I'll type that in the chat. There's a lot of writings by the Church Fathers on this. Just despondency. There's a lot of reasons, and those won't disappear if you're incorrect in your assumption. Then that's not the problem, right? In fact, the Council of Trent even says that celibacy is a better option than being with a wife or a husband if you're so inclined, right? It's a higher state in heaven, although the majority of people aren't inclined that way by nature. So that doesn't mean that you should, if it is truly against your nature, set that aside and become a monk. But being a monk, having that disposition, leads to a greater ability to acquire grace, as St. Paul says, The person who is married is worried about their husband and their wife, whereas the person who is single is only worried about the law of the Lord. Or rather, the Lord himself. Right. So now I've given you that brief, we're going to talk about ways to replace it and solve this problem. And by the way, I'm sure many of you have questions. Please tag me so when I scroll up and down through the chat, I can see them and answer them very quickly. So, the very first way that you solve this is, of course, delete all memes and avoid them. If they are out of sight, you are out of the near occasion to this kind of behaviour, and so you begin to forget about it. It'll take around maybe 3 weeks. Delete all of the memes that you have. I'm telling you right now. Open up the folder, then go in there, Control A, and then delete. Delete them. Get them out of your life and avoid people who post them repetitively. Because if you have this constantly risen up in your life, you're not going to forget it and you're not going to lose the problems that I've just described. This is a habituation with an exterior thing, and while we will still think about it, of course, then, it will fade over time. The second one is to remember humility and to practice it as often as you can. Let's face it, being lonely sucks. It's painful. you need patience to get through it. And patience is one of the fruits of the virtues, and the highest virtue is humility, from which all others flow. You need to understand that the situation that you are in is there for your good. You would not be suffering from this loneliness if there weren't some good reason for it. And as we hear from St. Paul, suffering begets endurance, endurance begets character, and character begets hope. And, loneliness is suffering. It's a very high level of suffering. So, you need patience to get through it. You need humility to accept it. You can't look at yourself like maybe an Elliot Rodgers character in his final video, He has this, it would appear, this assumption that he deserves a girlfriend somehow, right? A lot of guys feel that way, and on a low level, a lot of guys are offended that they're lonely. This is not the tack to take. Because without actual humility and submitting to your situation, you will never develop anything. They say pride comes before a fall, but often they will forget the other half of the proverb, which is that humility comes before glory. Another important one. Practice temperance, particularly in matters of sex, because one of the daughters of lust is loneliness and shame. You practice these sexual things perhaps with unchaste images, right? Unchaste things. It makes you lonely. It reminds you perhaps of a disgusting lie, that this is some form of legitimate intimacy that you lack. It's a lie. Cut this out of your life. Cut all of those actions out of your life, and you will begin to rise above the effects on the passions that were once caused by this. So stop masturbating. Stop entertaining lustful thoughts, and you will lose a lot of the loneliness, I suspect. I suspect many of you are very addicted to that, and quitting that will help you. And then finally, pray for a girlfriend rather than telling the world. It's all well and good to tell the world, right? You can say, oh, I'm single, you can insist you're single, and many girls do this as well. It's quite annoying. But that doesn't actually solve anything. God does. So ask him. And if you are to have a girlfriend at some point, then he'll give you one. That may be the fact that you haven't got a girlfriend at this point is because you're lacking in some virtue. And this may be something that's obvious to human intellect. You might be awkward. You might be overly arrogant. I know that I'm definitely in that category. Right? Many girls were interested in me, and out of my arrogance I rejected them. If you need to be aware that there's often reasons that you will never ever know until the final judgment as to why you have been, you receive this later on than other people. And this goes back to patience. You need to remember patience and just pray. Because the prayer will help your mood as well. Remember the power of prayer. This will be my final one. Okay, so I can see the chat here. Lots of questions, I'm suspecting. Humiliation of marriage. Yeah, that's part of the point, George. You're supposed to get married so you can be humble, because being humble is the highest virtue. And there's a complaint here about kneeling before a woman to marry her, to ask to marry her. I mean, first of all, it's tradition, and second of all, so what if it's humiliating? Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how it could possibly be. It's a beautiful moment, but if it's humiliating, all the better. Genuinely humiliating, not the kind that stirs up the pride or whatever, right? I mean, I find it rather strange that there could be a consideration of that. That this would somehow be anything but beautiful, but if it really does, then you probably need it. Not asserting to you specifically, George, but if people are embarrassed by such things, then they probably deserve embarrassment. Okay, let's see what else. Lots of discussion of this kneeling thing. Dagbreaker says he just went and asked the father. That is the best way of doing it. I thought charity was the highest virtue. Yes, but you won't receive it without humility. And humility is largely synonymous with charity. Remember, I think it's Philippians. In Philippians it's mentioned. I'm going to go check the riot, for those who are not on there. riot.renaissancemen.xyz. That is riot.renaissancemen.xyz. And there's a bunch of stuff on here. I think a lot of people's. Yeah, St. Paul says that it's charity, but charity is infused. So you receive it from God. And you need humility there first to even get that in the first place. How can you love a person if you think you're better than them? Actually, that's not a good argument. I mean, thinking that you are just so high and superior and acting like it isn't conducive to love. Whereas Christ, being in the form of God, did not deem it's something to be grasped at, but instead took the form of a slave, right? Being the least is to be the greatest. Okay, Hawaiian Lolo asks, how do we stop masturbation/porn? Right, so there are 4 ways. At least 4 ways. I'll probably go into them as they pop into my head. First of all, start fasting. The appetite that leads to you indulging in pornography is the same that leads to you indulging in food. So if you control your eating, if you fast, starting with just Fridays, right? If you reduce the amount you're eating, you will reduce your desire for the pornography and for the masturbation, right? This is a first step. Second of all, prayer. Prayer will clear your mind and will give you more power over things that pertain to the commandment. Not only because it implores God's grace, but also because you're focusing on something for a long time mentally. And your ability to focus on this will mean that you'll be able to shut out temptation more effectively. Thirdly, read the Bible. This will give you all the information you need to know as to why you don't masturbate. So, for example, the gnashing of teeth, because you will burn in hell if you die with a single unconfessed mortal sin, and all of these, consensually indulged in sexual things, of course, outside of the context of marriage. These things are, as far as I know, all mortal sins, or of a grave nature, right? Remember that. Right, that's number 3. Number 4, throw away any occasion you have to that. So if that means avoiding women, then avoid women. If that means throwing your laptop out of the window so you can't watch pornography, do it. If that means going and getting a brick and replacing your smartphone, do it. Those are 4 things that you can start with. I think a lot of people's desires for any partner at all comes from bad parents and role models. I don't know about that. I think that the majority of people have a natural inclination to be married, and so that's what attracts them to it. But seeing that they can't fulfill it for whatever reason, that'll be why, right? A lot of the time, it's just patience. Isn't prayer less effective when you're not in a state of grace? Yes, it is less effective, but that doesn't mean it's not effective. That's like saying, well, you can't run as effectively when you're obese, right? But of course, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't run. So it doesn't matter. Get the rosary and pray it. When I quit, I prayed the rosary twice a day. I prayed the rosary, and when I didn't do that, I prayed 20 psalms. I'd pray Psalms 1 through 10 in the morning, and then I'd go Psalms 11 through 19, through 20 rather, in the evening. And I did that for 3 months. What should we tell ourselves to do when we're lonely? Well, you should ask yourself why. Why am I lonely? Now, it's one thing if it's the lockdown. The lockdown has largely caused me to feel lonely as well, because I haven't been able to see my friends, and the university is shut down, so I can't just walk out the door and make new ones. I'm in a place where it's very hard to meet new people as well, right? That's something that you can't necessarily do something about, but there's always something that you can do about it, right? So, is it the way you're eating? That is actually one reason why you might feel lonely, because, of course, food is linked to the emotions, and that can cause things to go a bit doolally. Is it linked to the amount of water you're drinking? Drink enough water. Is it sleep? Are you staring at a screen for too long so you can't sleep? That's another reason, right? These things are things that you need to cover on a basic level. If you aren't eating well, then you shouldn't be surprised when you feel bad, right? Other things. Family situations, financial situations, right? Address the other areas of anxiety, because it may be that the anxiety in these areas is overspilling into your other areas, right? So, for example, right, like you might be overdue on like 5 credit cards, right? That's going to make you anxious, and it's just going to make everything else that's painful to you more painful, right? Because you'll always be at a higher level of emotional tension. Try and deal with those things, right? Go and look at what's his name, John Ramsey, I think his name is, or Ramsey something. I think it's John Ramsey. Dave Ramsey. That's it, Dave Ramsey. Sort that out. Get the finances sorted out, right? What I would tell you is to avoid most self-improvement YouTubers. I made this mistake myself, but thankfully, I was looking in the right places. I found the saints, and I read the fathers and things. Most of the self-improvement YouTubers are giving you very low-tier advice, right? They're giving you very simple things like, if a girl behaves like this, you can date her, or save 10% of your salary each month. Things that are very simple. The scriptures are far more complex, right? The scriptures will give you far more information than just that. Like, learning the book of Proverbs is like I'd say it's like all of the self-improvement YouTubers, and I mean all of them, combined multiplied by about 5. And that's just studying it maybe intensively for 2 or 3 weeks, right? You will get more out of the book of Proverbs alone than you will get out of these self-improvement YouTubers. Go and study that, right? Don't get indulged in whatever, like, I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure that many of you know the sorts of people I'm talking about. The only real use for a lot of these self-improvement people is for things like exercise regimes, and even then they're not very good. And very specific financial advice, right? Aside from that, they're useless. They will often do things like repeat a lot of the pagan wisdom as well. And the thing that I've noticed as well, because I've been reading Plato and the Church Fathers concurrently together, because as you remember, I released a reading list of the Church Fathers, and I've been going through that. I also made one for Platonism and Aristotelianism. And the thing that you'll notice immediately is that the pagans are very conceited in a lot of ways. They have this lack of humility, and they also make a lot of very strange errors and do certain rhetorical flourishes that aren't necessarily as honest as perhaps the author wants you to think they are, right? Whereas the fathers are extremely straightforward. They're often complex, they're often difficult to understand, but they're straightforward. And so when you have people repeating, say, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Plutarch, Plato, Aristotle, like these works are in themselves more useful than a lot of the stuff that the other people will regurgitate, right? But they contain a certain spirit that is not good. And I only noticed this when the book I've been reading for my mental prayer recently, Humility of Heart by Father Cajetan Mary de Bergamo, right, pointed it out. But now I can't unsee it. I would recommend Dionysius not watching self-improvement YouTubers, but going reading the books. Seriously. The reading of the books is not only an act of penance, right? the Divine Reading, the Lectio Divina of the Benedictines, that was actually a penance, and it builds up temperance, right? Because if you're looking at screen reading, not much is bouncing around. You're not really having your attention destroyed, right? You need to build, attention to actually do this, right? The books will contain more information than the YouTubers, even like myself, right? Like I can sit here and talk and answer questions in a very short form, but frankly, the likes of St. John Chrysostom, St. Augustine, St. Chasarius of Arles, the Desert Fathers, these people, they transcend me massively, and particularly the Bible, right? If you get the Bible and a good commentary, it's great, particularly if you pray on it and spend a lot of time, right? You're going to get a lot more information out of that than you are out of me. I'm just going to send the Platonism reading list to somebody on the Discord. Right. Okay. Right, okay. Aristides called the Christians kind. I doubt it was Plato, because Aristides was 400 years before. Right, okay, let's see. Are there any questions that I missed? Why is it humiliating to follow orders and learn things? I think you're just asking... Oh, I see. I must admit, I do have to agree with George that a lot of the stuff in school is completely useless. But a lot of it is really good. Like, I wouldn't have the appreciation for primary sources that I have nowadays. Like, going and reading the Fathers directly. Going and reading the ancient sources for myself. If I didn't have a history teacher when I was about 16... And I think that, I have a feeling that the other one encourage this a bit as well, who was incredibly insistent on us reading the primary sources. And that has served me infinitely. Because I'm used to reading the primary sources myself. And then when I go and read the modern books, like it just seems like it's kind of dumbed down. And it's a little annoying. What's your opinion on Buddhism? It's cringe. That's my opinion of it. It thinks that the solution to the human problem is to kill the patient. Destroy all desire. No. The solution is to have the correct desires, and desires that can actually be fulfilled in a satisfying way. So the desire for God, the desire for family, the desire for virtue. Whereas Buddhism just says, nope, just cut off all desire. I think it's completely pointless. In fact, I think that most Eastern religions, and by Eastern I mean like east of, I don't know, Basra in Iraq, right? Most of them really aren't that good. Sorry to be blunt with you, as I've just seen you respond in the chat, but I think it's the case. Is Omad diet a valid form of fasting? Yes. Do you like Marsilio Ficino? Yes. I'm gonna see if I can get a hold of his Platonic theology on the immortal soul, but it is very expensive. That's the one problem. There's not a cheap alternative available online, except for the Itatini. I think it's Itatini Renaissance Library, and I'm not willing to pirate things. I will only ever buy them now, or if they're free, they're free. Alright, let's have a look. Okay, let's see. Actually, I think your answer was useful and gave me some insight. Okay, so you changed your mind. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I haven't sat there and read like the Mahabharata which is obviously a Hindu text from back to front, and I haven't read the Upanishads, but I know enough about Eastern religion, so transmigration of souls, and things like that, and this sort of weird Platonism, to know that it's ridiculous. Right, actually, one of the best arguments I've seen against the transmigration of souls is in chapter 4 of the Dialogue of Trypho. Let me find it for you. For those who don't know what the transmigration of souls is, it's essentially what people think is... it's not chapter 4, is it? It might be chapter 5. Was it? It might be 4 or 5. Ah, yeah, I think it's 5. Yeah, it's chapter 4. Okay, so transmigration is what we talk about when we're talking about what most people think of when they think of reincarnation, right? So, like, a smart person will know, like, you know, my body rots and it might be used for a plant, right? Like, there are some people who believe that in a sense is reincarnation, which I think is a little bit strange. But yeah, like, when I'm eaten by the worms, of course I'm nourishing the worms. But the transmigration of souls is what we typically think of as reincarnation. So you die and your soul goes into a monkey, or it goes, you know, dwells in the world of the forms if you listen to Plato. Or if you're really unlucky, according to the Hindus, or some forms of Hindus, you become a woman, right? So let's read this dialogue. So this is a conversation between Justin and this old man. And the old man goes to him, "Is there then such and so great a power in our mind? Or can a man not perceive by sense sooner? Will the mind of man see God at any time, if it is uninstructed by the Holy Spirit?" And Justin, who becomes a saint, but at this point is a Platonist. "Plato indeed says that the mind's eye is of such a nature, and has been given for this end, that we may see that very being when the mind is pure itself, who is the cause of all discerned by the mind, having no colour, no form, no greatness, nothing. Indeed, which is the bodily eye looks upon. But it is something of this sort," he goes on to say, "that is beyond all essence, unutterable and inexplicable, but alone honourable and good, coming suddenly into souls well dispositioned, on account of their affinity to and desire of seeing him." The old man responds, "What affinity, then, is there between us and God? Is the soul also divine and immortal, and a part of that very regal mind? And even as that sees God, so also is it attainable by us who conceive of the deity in our mind, and thence to become happy? Assuredly. And do all the souls of all living beings comprehend him? Or are the souls of men of one kind, and the souls of horses and of butts of another kind? No, but the souls which are in all are similar. Then shall both horses and butts see? Or have they seen at some time or other God?" Justin replies, "No, for the majority of men will not, saving such as shall live justly, purified by righteousness, and by every other virtue." The old man responds, "It is not, therefore, on account of his affinity, that a man sees God, nor because he has a mind, but because he is temperate and righteous? Yes, because he has that whereby he perceives God. What then? Do goats or sheep injure anyone? Not in any respect. Therefore these animals will see God, according to your account." Justin replies, "No, for their body, being of such a nature, is an obstacle to them." So the old man responds, "If these animals could assume speech, be well assured that they would with greater reason ridicule our body. But let us now dismiss this subject, and let us be conceded to, as you say. Tell me, however, this: does the soul see God so long as it is in the body, or after it has been removed from it?" Justin responds, "So long as it is in the form of a man, it is possible for it to attain to this by means of the mind, but especially when it has been set free from the body, and being apart by itself, it gets possession of that which it is wont continually and wholly to love." The old man goes, "Does it remember this, then, the sight of God being, he's referring to, when it is again in the man?" Justin replies, "It does not appear to me so. What, then, is the advantage to those who have seen God? Or what has he who has seen more than he who has not seen, unless he remember this fact, that he has seen?" Justin replies, "I cannot tell. And what do those suffer who are judged to be unworthy of this spectacle. They are imprisoned in the bodies of certain wild beasts, and this is their punishment. Do they, then, that is, for this reason they are in such forms? Do they know, then, that it is for this reason that they are in such forms, and that they have committed some sin? I do not think so, Justin responds. Then these reap no advantage from their punishment, as it seems. Moreover, I would say that they are not punished unless they are conscious of the punishment. Justin replies, no indeed. Therefore, souls neither see God nor transmigrate into other bodies, for they would know that so they are punished, and they would be afraid to commit even the most trivial sin afterwards. But that they can perceive that God exists, and that righteousness and piety are honourable. I also quite agree with you. Justin ends, you are right. So there we go, right? A person who is trapped in an animal's body by means of reincarnation has no means of actually reascending that hierarchy, and the person who remains a man doesn't remember seeing God, so he has no way to act, right? So the majority of men who are trapped in sins, who are trapped in vices, are reincarnated as animals, and therefore can't actually act on the knowledge of reincarnation. So transmigration becomes rather strangely unfitting. Do you think there's any validity to the idea of chakras? If I remember correctly, they're like energy fields around specific parts of the body. No, I don't think there is. I think that some of it is just, poking certain stress points, and that feels good. But no. Before I dropped A-level history, my teachers would tell us to make notes from the textbook. Maybe I would have carried on if I had teachers like yours. The only use of textbooks is their sources. They often have big bibliographies, and you should use those. Particularly for things like, economic data, right? Those things aren't typically put into normal history books, but they're often in textbooks, and from there you can find the sources and read. Tips on dealing with dryness in prayer. Remember that dry prayer is superior to wet prayer, right? So, like, prayer that you receive some sort of consolation for. You're doing better prayer when you do that, so just persist in the prayer. Have I read Epicurus? No, I haven't read Epicurus. How does God view suicide? It's a grave sin. How do you argue against a classical theist who does not believe in any of the more established religions? Well, it would depend entirely on the classical theist that we're talking about. I mean, does he have an appreciation for history? Then in that case, I would point to the scriptures showing a continual development of doctrine and predicting something that would seem to be impossible and yet happened. So, I mean, unless they want to listen to nobody but, well, frankly, the very biased and remarkably unconvincing, I might say, the remarkably irrational side of higher criticism. I'm turning 21 tomorrow. Any life advice? Well, I don't know you that well, but what I would say is keep an eye on your finances, pray every single day, at least 15 minutes, preferably as much as you can, and try to remember that while financial independence is important, the highest pursuit in your life should be God, and then virtue, and then after that, you can indulge in, pleasure. Pleasure isn't of itself evil. Pleasure is good, obviously, but it should not control you. Also, don't place your hopes in things like meaningless honours, right? So, like, receiving a bachelor's degree, like, just for the bachelor itself, like, just having that, I can say, oh, I've got a bachelor's, oh, I've got a master's, oh, I've got a PhD. That's vanity. But using it for some good end, so for example, getting a job, or like developing an expertise in a field that you really think you're going to find useful, or well, yeah, if you really think it's going to be useful, right, that's a valid reason. But honor itself is not good. Yeah, you see, Thexan, like, a lot of schools think that they're very good. Like, a lot of universities say they're incredible, but really, they seem very similar from what I've heard. Opinions on psychedelics, leave them alone. Never ever play with them. I mean it. How do you argue against a classical theist who does not believe in any of the more established religions, such as the Neoplatonists, like Plotinus? Wait, so he's like a Neoplatonist. Which group is a better metaphysics, the Neoplatonists or the Aristotelians? Oh, I mean, I've been reading Plato a lot, which isn't Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism is more rational, but I think Aristotle was a marked improvement. But if the friend you're referring to is a Neoplatonist, I'd recommend that he starts by reading Contra Celsus by Origen, and then goes and reads The City of God by St. Augustine. Because both of them are Platonists, right? Origen was contemporary with Plotinus, and Augustine was a Platonist before he became a Catholic. And like, he should look into their insights, because frankly, from what I've seen of a lot of the Platonists, they're just simply superior. Is there any concept in Catholicism comparable with the Chinese mandate of heaven? Not that I'm aware of. Opinion on the Jesus prayer. I like it. I've got like, well, I had 3. I've now got 2 prayer ropes. It's a good prayer. It's not something that I've gotten into the habit of, though. I know a Protestant who took mushrooms and said it cured his depression. Yeah, but you also know people who take LSD once and die. Do you want to take that risk? Is investing in Bitcoin, stocks, etc. sinful? No. No, there's nothing wrong with investment. I wouldn't, like, practically speaking, I wouldn't invest in Bitcoin. Also, it's only sinful with stocks if you're funding an immoral business. So if it's producing abortions, or doing, I don't know, extracting the stem cells from fetuses, or cells contraception. Like, those things are immoral because you're engaged in, what is it? Remote. I mean, it's intentional cooperation, really. If you know that it does this and you're investing the money, then it's intentional, which is sinful. Advice on a step establishing a deeper connection in prayer. It feels forced. Yeah, you'll get to the point where it feels forced, but you keep going. It's a test. Just keep going. Like, you shouldn't pray for the sake of consolation. This is one of the mistakes that Martin Luther made. Never ever pray for consolation. It could be, like, there have been times where you really not want to pray. There will be times where you think where it is physically painful to pray, and you should still force yourself to do it anyway, because it's what you need to do. Opinions on the philosophy of St. Bonaventure and Blessed John Duns Scotus. I'm no philosophy, but their philosophy seems intuitively more sensible than the Thomists. In what sense? I mean, I'm developing a very strong respect for especially Scotus, because I think I'm going to end up using a lot of his work for stuff that I do in the future. But beyond that, I'm not really sure. What about investing in big defense contractors? Well, as far as I understand, the Vatican says, at least from a disciplinary point of view, that there's no real ability to wage just wars nowadays. So I would bear that in mind. The league tables and the press are very deceiving. Yeah, like, I don't believe... I've heard from people who have gone to, say, Oxbridge, that... I mean, obviously there's a higher level of focus on the students, but it's not nearly as good as they make it look. Like, I have to admit, some of the university stuff that I've done is like it's less intense than secondary school. It's kind of annoying. But on the other hand, there are also some very useful things that you can get out of university as well. But I think the most of it is really just having a set schedule where you do certain assignments and it forces you to study, as well as the social. The social of uni is really the biggest part. I don't know about that, Tom. I don't know if it precludes joining the military. I mean, it depends on your motivation, right? Like, joining to kill people is not a good motivation for being in the military, for example. Like, you'd be better qualified to talk to a moral theologian, and I'm not a moral theologian. Oh man, like I could talk a lot about my alma mater. I mean, there are a lot of good professors there, but there are some that were just dreadful. A lot of You see, it really depends what you want to do. It really depends what you want to do with uni. Like, if you want to do, I don't know, like something academic, right? Go to uni, by all means, right? If you want to do something academic and you go into, I don't know, one of the humanities, do the research and you will absolutely excel. If you play the game. If you want to develop a skill that you can't develop anywhere else. So, for example, I don't know, electronic engineering, right? Go to uni. But if you're just kind of going there, then there's no point. If you're... Actually, I think one of the best things that you could possibly do, right, is go to a town that has a university, locate all of the different societies, and just go to the societies. Just go to the societies. Don't bother paying the loans. Just say, oh, I'm here because, like, I'm not going to pay 9,000, but make friends with the people on the campus. Nah, don't take the STEM meme. I actually, do I regret taking the STEM meme? Not in terms of a career, I don't. But in terms of, like, the course that I did, yeah, it wasn't particularly interesting. Is there anything you think Blessed John Duns Scotus was right about, that St. Thomas was wrong about? I do think that the will is logically prior to the intellect. That is one thing that I agree with Scotus on over Aquinas. I think it's a lot more liable that you will make errors in will without really thinking through it than, just having everything preceded by intellect. In connection to Dionysius, what do you think that St. Thomas was right about, that Blessed John Duns Scotus was wrong about? The nature of being. I think the univocity of being was really, really, really weird. I think you can only really equivocate on being. What else? Distinction in the soul. I think that going... I can't remember if Scotus may well not think this, but I think that the sort of distinctions that go on are a bit excessive with Scotus from what I've heard of him. I agree with Aquinas that the soul is simple, meaning it's completely uncomposed. And that's perfectly fine. And I don't know what Scotus thinks. From what I understand, I think he thinks there's some sort of composition there. I may well be wrong. That I disagree with. If you hold that the soul is composed, then I don't agree with that. That would be one thing. But I don't know if he actually held that. Was the Spanish Civil War a just war? For what side? And by the way, if you want to make this an excuse for me to Fed post, I'm not going to. What do you think was the last just war? Ooh, Falklands maybe? Not on account of the Argentines, but on account of the British, of course. Anyway, we've been going for quite a while. I think I'm going to close up the stream. I hope it was very useful for you fellas. And I will see you guys later. Goodbye.